8.
So we just started to record it on Zoom, and then
Okay, great.
oh wait, hold on a minute. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is where I can only select one page, but anyway, I'll have to do it on Vero Vino Gusto. All right, so we're momentarily live on Facebook. So this is sort of when you never know when we're like actually live, but
Yeah, I saw that the other day.
so yeah, we're probably live now. So
Okay, great.
okay. All right, good. So I'm gonna let everyone in to the Zoom. Hold on a minute. Hey everyone, this is Sheila Donahue of Vero. Thanks for joining us. Vero, which means real in Italian, is a company that I started 3 years ago after living in Italy for many years, getting to know a lot of small winemakers that are also farmers making delicious wines and olive oils. And so we import the wines and olive oils in, and we sell them to businesses and consumers around the United States. Our website is verovinogusto.com. And we love to have, it's all about discovery. That's what our business is about. It's about discovering new types of wines and new producers and the stories behind them. And today we have with us Alberto Payantini, who is a winemaker and vigneron in Moltaccino, just right outside the historic center. His family's winery is Canalino. And I'm super delighted to have with us as well a longtime friend who with whom I have a lot in common. We are both Americans. We've been living in Italy for many years, and we're both fairly new women entrepreneurs. Alex has a business she started recently called Alex Smuggler Travel. It's a travel design company. And she lives in Moltaccino. So it's like a perfect opportunity to assemble all these wonderful people together. And feel free, by the way, to show your video. We want to make this interactive. If you have a question, feel free to use the chat, which I'll be monitoring, or you can just unmute yourself. So I'll turn it over to Alex at this point.
Great. Thank you so much, Sheila. It's really great to be here this evening. So like Sheila said, I'm here with Alberto at his winery. So I wanted to start off tonight's conversation just sharing a little bit about where we are in Italy. So Montalcino is in southern Tuscany. We're 45 minutes south of Siena. And the town of Montalcino is a hilltop town, and it's located 1,850 feet above sea level. So that strategic location has always protected the town in the past from invaders and enemies, but it also meant that the town has a great location for growing wine. And something that a lot of people don't know about Montalcino is that they've always grown grapes here, but in the past they grew white grapes. So it wasn't until the 1800s that they really started, kind of the second half of the 1800s, that they started experimenting with red grapes. So at that point, farmers started making a red wine from the Sangiovese grape. And it was 100% Sangiovese. And they were just kind of playing around at that point. And they discovered that it was really, really great. So that was the start of Brunello. And that was at the second half of the 1800s. Then going into the 1900s, you know, the idea didn't really catch on really quickly. So there was still a really small amount of producers. It was only in the second half of the 1900s and really into the 70s and the 80s that the number of producers started to grow. And then it really just took off and it gained tons of popularity. And Brunello became known all around the world. And so today in Montalcino, there's over 200 producers. And one of the producers is Alberto.
Hi.
And like I said, we're at his family's winery today. And the name of the winery is Podere Canalino. And so I wanted to share a little bit about his winery before I jump in and start asking him some questions. So like Sheila said, I live in Montalcino. And one of the things that I really love about Alberto's winery is that you can reach it on foot from the historic center of Montalcino. So it's just a short walk down the hill. You go out through a historic gate called Porta, I forget the name, Porta Burelli. And then you have this beautiful panorama that opens up in front of you. And you look out down across valleys of vineyards and flowers and this classic cypress Tuscan tree, the classic Tuscan cypress tree. And it's a stunning panorama. And that's what you see from Alberto's property. So Alberto, this is a really special place. Can you tell us a little bit about how your family came to have this land?
La nostra famiglia è sempre rimasta in questo territorio anche prima che fosse fatta la cantina o tutte le stanze che appartengono a questo podere. È stato proprio il lavoro, hanno costruito questa abitazione apposta per questi familiari antichi, bisnonni, che venivano quotidianamente a lavorare nel terreno e facendoci l'abitazione e quindi tutto quello che serviva per portare avanti il territorio, sono venuti ad abitare in questa abitazione, in questo podere. Con il tempo, dopo la mezzadria, acquistarono il podere perché comunque era una scelta del proprietario dare la possibilità, acquistava nell'azienda, nel piccolo appezzamento di terreno e l'abitazione di acquistare, e acquistarono a suo tempo mio nonno e il suo fratello.
Okay. So let me translate that. So what Alberto was saying was that his family has been working this land for many generations. So first it was his great grandparents that worked on the land. And at that point, they didn't own the land, but they were actually sharecropping. So they were working it for the nobles who owned the land. And then they were able to keep some of the produce that they were growing on the land. And then in the 1900s, there was the possibility for his grandparents to buy the land. So at that point, they went ahead and bought it. And so they've been here for many, many generations. And tell me, Alberto, did you always grow grapes on this property or did you grow something else in the past?
In the past, quando ero bambino, venivo ad aiutare i nonni e i nonni coltivavano ortaggi, frutti e anche un po' di vino, ecco. Però era, diciamo, c'era un po' di tutto un po', dagli ortaggi alla frutta, quindi il vino, l'olio e attualmente il terreno abbiamo fatto un vigneto specializzato da 20 anni che ci aiuta a produrre soprattutto uva e quindi
Okay. So Alberto is saying that when he was little, he would come here and help his grandparents. And at that point, they were mainly growing fruits and vegetables on the land. They have also always grown olives as well and produced olive oil. And they always had some grapes on the land as well, but that really wasn't the primary use in the past. It was more fruits and vegetables. So it was in 1999 that you really planted all of the vineyard that exists today. What prompted that decision?
Ma la decisione è stata presa da mio padre, che aveva la passione del vino, soprattutto la passione del vino, e siccome comunque i nonni erano anziani e questa passione Montalcino era comunque una grande possibilità avere un vigneto, c'era il terreno e abbiamo fatto questo vigneto specializzato nel 99-2000 e abbiamo iniziato a vinificare le uve nel 2004. Quindi la motivazione è un'evoluzione generazionale e comunque questa grande possibilità che il commercio di questo sangiovese vinificato invecchiato aveva per altri produttori, quindi un discorso proprio di economicità, insomma, di reddito, ecco, diverso, un po' più magari anche facile, ecco, rispetto a quello che erano gli ortaggi o la frutta in collina.
Okay. So in 1999, they planted all of the vineyards that exist today, and they really kind of covered all of the terrain with vineyards. And so I was asking what really prompted that decision. And so Alberto shared with me that it was something that kind of came with the generations. So his grandparents had really focused on fruits and vegetables, but then his dad had a passion for wine. And so it was really his dad's passion for wine that prompted them to plant all of the vineyards that exist on the property today. Also, you have to think in 1999, as I said in the introduction, Brunello was already exploding and known internationally. So there was also, it just made sense. They were lucky enough to have this very precious land here in Montalcino. And so that combined with his dad's passion for wine drove them to plant all of the vineyards here. So something I wanted to tell all of you about the property is that we are on the side of a hill. And so the property is anything but flat. And it goes from about 1,150 feet up to almost 1,400 feet on the property. So it's very uneven. So Alberto, tell me, it can't be easy to work on property that's so uneven. What's that like?
La difficoltà di questo terreno è proprio che siamo in media collina a ridosso del paese di Montalcino e quindi per fare una quantità di viti sul terreno abbiamo dovuto comunque impiantare in 11 pezzi diversi per fare un etto. Quindi lavorare in media collina non è molto facile, però c'è il frutto, diciamo, che viene fuori è più profumato e quindi la qualità al naso è migliore, ecco, rispetto magari a altre zone più in pianura rispetto a queste in zona.
Okay, so Alberto is telling me that it's not easy to work here on this terrain. In fact, because it's so uneven, they have to plant 11 different plots of grapes to obtain a hectare. So it's really spread out and a lot of work, but he said that there's a benefit to that. So the grapes that are grown here on the hills are more profumatic and intense with all of their different smells compared to the grapes that are grown down in the valley, where obviously it's easier, it's nice and flat, but you don't get the benefit of all those really nice perfumes in the end product. So I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the property because this is such a special place. And I really encourage all of you, if you come to Montalcino, to come visit Alberto. I'll tell you just a little story that the couple times that I've come and have visited Alberto, I've ended up staying for hours just because he is such a wonderful host and it's so much fun to explore his beautiful property and try all of his wines. So if you come here to Montalcino, definitely recommend that. So one of the things that I noticed when I first visited Alberto's vineyards was the great diversity of plants. So there's still tons of olive trees. There's tons of different fruit trees, from cherries to figs to peaches and plums and apples. So just this incredible biodiversity on the vineyard. So Alberto, can you tell us a little bit about the biodiversity and why you decided to keep all of that?
La biodiversità è sempre stata il fulcro di questo appezzamento di terra, ecco, quindi prima, quando non c'era il vigneto specializzato, c'erano gli olivi e le viti nello stesso appezzamento di terreno, quindi oltre a quello ce ne sono molte siepi che servono per molti motivi. Il primo motivo sono comunque i profumi che i fiori di ginestre, scopi, castagni possono diffondere nell'ambiente, quindi di per sé anche le grappoli delle uve assorbono questi odori nella crescita. Le fragole, ecco, le fragole di bosco, le more, sono tutti frutti che lasciano un sentore poi nel grappolo, nella crescita durante tutta l'estate, la primavera e l'estate, quindi settembre. Il primo motivo è questo, quindi i profumi che queste siepi, questi frutti selvatici lasciano di per sé nell'ambiente. Poi sono utili anche dal punto di vista degli insetti, quindi ci sono insetti positivi che siccome negli ambienti dove sono le specializzazioni di vigneti o di qualsiasi altra vegetazione, ci sono pericoli di attacchi di insetti nocivi, quindi tanti insetti antagonisti combattono questi insetti nocivi per le piante vivendo intorno all'appezzamento di vigna specializzata, quindi è importante lasciare le siepi anche per questo motivo, al di là del fatto che comunque poi anche quando si dà trattamenti poi che si danno ti proteggono da altre situazioni di spargere dove non serve, ecco, questi sono i motivi.
So there are two main reasons that Alberto has decided to keep all of this biodiversity on the property. The first one is that it actually impacts more flavors into the grapes. So he has different plants like blackberries. In fact, on Sheila's Instagram, I know that she shared a picture of Alberto picking blackberries. So you'll find lots of blackberries on the property, wild strawberries, jasmine, and all of those different things really end up into the final product. So they influence the grapes and aspects of those end up kind of being absorbed by the grapes, if you will, and then showing up in the final product of the wine. The other reason that he's kept the biodiversity is in order to protect the vines. So the various plants that grow on the property are a nice house for what we would call the good insects. And so the good insects kind of keep the bad insects away that could cause damage to the grapes. So another thing that I noticed about Alberto's property when I came, and something you would notice too, as soon as you come, you hear this noise of water on the property, this really gentle trickling, which is really quite lovely. So there's a natural spring here, and Alberto's very fortunate to have that. And I want to ask him a little bit about the effect of the spring here,
yes,
both in growing the grapes and then also making the wine.
Ci sono tre praticamente benefici da questa sorgente, a parte che si sfrutta questa sorgente purificandola e quindi c'è un risparmio da quel punto di vista. Secondariamente questa acqua sia a primavera che durante l'estate, quando è molto caldo, a primavera praticamente c'è un tenore, una temperatura che quando magari si va a sfiorare lo zero lascia un po' di tepore intorno, perché comunque quest'acqua è sempre intorno a 12 gradi, quindi lascia, quando è 0 gradi, riscalda un po' l'ambiente e evita il discorso delle gelate. Secondariamente durante l'estate, quando è molto caldo, la sorgente rimane sempre a questa temperatura 11-12 gradi e raffresca, quindi raffrescando i frutti si mantengono profumati, lascia un'area molto fresca e da questa escursione termica causata dalla sorgente aiuta la maturazione della buccia e quindi anche tenere i profumi che assorbe naturalmente nella zona. Di per sé questa sorgente viene sfruttata anche in vinificazione per raffreddare le vasche quando c'è pericolo di surriscaldarle durante i rimontaggi e quindi la vinificazione alcolica.
Great. So the natural spring has tons of benefits. One of the benefits is climate control. So the spring is always around 12 degrees Celsius. So in the winter time, when it gets really cold, and here in Montalcino, it will actually go down below freezing, the spring helps to warm up the environment and warm up the vineyards. Then in the summer, it does the opposite. So when it gets really, really hot, the spring helps to cool down the vineyards. So it works as a sort of climate control out in the vineyards. Another big benefit is that it provides nice, clean water. So when he purifies the water, he can use it in different parts of the winemaking process. So for example, when I came out to the winery a few weeks ago, and they had just harvested the new grapes, and they were going through their first fermentation process in the big steel vats. Because of the fermentation process, the temperature goes up. You don't want it to go up too high. So he was using water from the spring to run over the vat continuously all day long to bring the temperature down to an appropriate point. So you released your first wine on the market in 2004, correct?
Yes.
So can you tell us what kind of wines you make here? I imagine Brunello.
Sì, cioè la prima annata in cui abbiamo vinificato, il discorso è questo, è il 2004 e è stata un'esperienza nuova sia dal punto di vista che bisognava vinificare in maniera professionale, perché avevamo sempre vinificato l'uva del podere, ma in piccola quantità, ecco, non era una quantità, e quindi abbiamo imparato a fare il lavoro di grandi cantine in maniera molto piccola, ecco, perché cantine grandi qui in zona sono molto più grandi di noi, ecco, hanno già tantissimi anni di esperienza rispetto a noi, cioè ci hanno insegnato un po' anche loro come mettere i primi passi durante la vinificazione, la raccolta, le attenzioni che ci vogliono nel pulire il grappolo, e quindi il Brunello la prima annata in cui abbiamo fatto la vinificazione, l'imbottigliamento, l'affinamento è del 2004, sì, e abbiamo continuato quasi tutti gli anni, ecco, a fare sia vinificazione, affinamento, imbottigliamento e quindi vendita di quei nostri prodotti che già in America erano presenti, ecco, comunque da diversi anni. Poi cambia l'importatore e ora c'è anche sì, Sheila.
Sì. So in 2004, they released their first wine onto the market. They're a really small family winery, but they learned their winemaking techniques from some of the other big wineries in the area. And now what we're going to do is, if you hadn't noticed, I'm going to move the camera just a little bit. I'll try to go slow, not to make anyone motion sick. But right now we're standing in the cantina, in the winery. So these are the large barrels where the wine is aging. And what we're going to do is we're going to move from this space and go up into Alberto's house and sit by the fireplace and start tasting some of these great wines. So bear with us as we just move from the winery here up into the house.
Okay, so while they're moving, we might lose them for a couple seconds because of the reception, but I just, we did have a question from Eleanor asking, is the vineyard biodynamic? And as, you know, as Alberto had explained, his approach, and this is also speaking from my own perspective, his approach is very traditional. So in Italy, the tradition was that you had a garden, you had a garden, a vegetable garden, you grew your own fruits and you grew grapes. And certainly the majority of his property is vineyards now, but there is, there are, as I mentioned, olive trees and other fruits, like wild blackberries that he happened to pick while I was visiting him last year. And and then I'm sure this will come out shortly, but he is organic, so it's organic farming. And then when he makes his wines, he doesn't add anything to the wine as it's fermenting and being made. So for example, he doesn't add yeast. It's all a native, a native yeast, a natural fermentation from the yeast that's in his vineyards. So basically it's like a natural wine, which I think is also special, because you you really taste the terroir. And just another quick note, because you didn't really get to see a whole lot of the barrel room where they were, but they're all these big barrels, and they're neutral oak. So so his approach is to ferment and age his wines in neutral oak. So all three of them, as you see in front of the three that we'll be tasting. So speaking of tasting, and I understand you have a pretty good spread there.
We do, yeah. And I'm going to share it with you. Let's see. So Alberto's just pouring our first wine. We do also have, let me just do this, a really nice spread of salumi, so cured meats, and some cheese as well. So that's going to pair really nicely, especially with these first two wines that we're trying. So all three wines that we're going to be trying tonight are made from the same exact grape. So they're all made from 100% Sangiovese. And I think that makes this tasting really, really special, because you would think, okay, we have three wines all made from the same grape. Aren't they all going to taste the same? But the answer is no. So we'll dive into a little bit of why the answer is no. And we're going to start out here with the Rosso di Toscana. So this one here. So like all the others, this is 100% Sangiovese. And Alberto, can you tell me a little bit about why you decided to make this Rosso di Toscana?
Sì, allora, la decisione di fare un rosso di Toscana è per accontentare tutta la clientela che magari non riesce a permettersi di spendere tanto e comunque bere un buon Sangiovese, ecco, il discorso è questo qui. Quindi noi durante la raccolta facciamo una scelta dei grappoli, dai migliori a quelli di una qualità inferiore, e quindi abbiamo 3, anche 4 scelte di Sangiovese, e a seconda dei gradi, del colore, della qualità della maturazione, scegliamo anche una piccola quantità di uve per fare il rosso di Toscana, che è Sangiovese in purezza.
Okay. So Alberto was saying that he decided to make this Rosso di Toscana as his entry-level wine. He wanted something that was really approachable for everyone. And so when he harvests his grapes, he divides the grapes into different categories. He looks at all of the grapes, decides based on the color and the alcohol percentage, which grapes will go into each wine. So these are kind of what he called the inferior quality. So the lesser of the wines that he makes, but still a very, very excellent quality, being grown in this area that's known for just exceptional Sangiovese. So this is a really great wine to start the night. It's easy to drink. Let's go ahead and try it. Can you tell us a little bit? Cheers. Cheers to everyone. Can you tell us a little bit about the fumes that you're smelling?
È un vino più fresco che chiaramente ha avuto un po' di invecchiamento in legno, molto poco rispetto agli altri, e quindi è molto abboccato, nel senso che è vicino molto alle uve, ecco, non ha un grosso affinamento in rovere, e quindi è molto fresco rispetto agli altri, ecco.
So he was saying that this wine is really fresh compared to the others. It spends a little bit of time in wood. Quanto tempo spende in legno questo?
Ma dai 4 ai 6 mesi.
Between 4 and 6 months in wood. So it doesn't have a lot of kind of that impact of aging for a long time in wood. So it keeps it really fresh, really nice, just wine to start out the evening and to eat or to pair with these nice cured meats and cheeses. So Alberto, something that might surprise a lot of the people watching is that you studied engineering at university.
Yes.
You study engineering at university, and now you're a winemaker. Can you tell us about that transition? How did you go from studying engineering to making wine?
Questo impegno familiare è stato molto grande in assenza del padre, e quindi siamo rimasti io, mia madre e mia sorella a portare avanti, e adesso anche mia moglie con i bambini, a portare avanti l'attività che era stata intrapresa da mio padre, e quindi tutto questo grande affare che c'è dietro a queste bottiglie non è che mi ha dato la libertà anche di andare al lavoro, ecco, è stata un po', diciamo, o fo qui o continuo qui, oppure o metto in affitto, oppure c'è stata comunque anche la bellezza di iniziare con mio padre e poi mi ha dato la forza di continuare, perché è molto impegnativo, ecco, non è facile tutti gli anni produrre anche di tipologia diverse in quantità media 10.000 bottiglie in media collina, ecco, non è facile, quindi c'è un gran lavoro di fatica fisico, anche di intelletto, perché bisogna leggere la stagione, bisogna capire cosa fare in vigna, bisogna saper vinificare, quindi l'impegno è tanto, però non è lo studio che mi ha aiutato a studiare, quindi alla fine l'intelligenza la applico in quest'altro campo, e quando ho bisogno di fare l'elettricista metto un po' da solo, ecco, riesco bene senza chiedere niente a nessuno, come altre cose che servere in campagna, perché sono trattori, c'è l'imbottigliatrice, le pompe, quindi sono molte cose da fare e riesco anche a riparare da me, ecco, lavorare e anche sapere organizzarsi anche a livello mentale per seguire la vinificazione, l'imbottigliamento, l'affinamento e anche le vendite, cioè c'è un'organizzazione aziendale che riesco a seguire da me. Certo, non faccio tutto da solo, perché comunque quando si vendemmia ci vuole tante persone, quando si imbottiglia bisogna essere in 4, 5, quindi quando si svina almeno 2 o 3 persone ci vogliono, e non faccio tutto da solo perché i familiari mi aiutano, ecco, i familiari che sono di volta in volta cambiano, la madre o la moglie o la sorella ci sono sempre, ecco. Poi ci sono altre conoscenze, amicizie che quando c'è la vendemmia vengono, e quindi si sta un po' in famiglia, ecco, diciamo è una piccola azienda, quindi si rimane in amicizia a fare le cose, ecco, diciamo sì.
Okay, Alberto is testing my memory, so let's see if I remember all of that. Good thing I haven't drunk that much wine yet. So what he was saying is that he studied engineering at university, but then returns to work in the winery, first with his father, and then unfortunately his father passed away. And so it really fell onto him to continue this tradition and this passion that his father started. So he carried it on along with his mom and his sister. And he really is the primary person that works here. So there are no other employees. He does almost everything by himself. He was saying that during the harvest and during the bottling, he'll bring other people in to help. In fact, next year, I really hope I'm one of those people that gets to come and help with harvest. And so people will come in and help him during those critical moments, but otherwise it's really Alberto. He is the guy behind these wines. And I think it's really incredible because wines, you know, are very romantic and we all love to drink them. But the work behind it is absolutely incredible. It really is a huge dedication to make this wonderful wine. And so it all comes down to Alberto. He was saying that even though he studied engineering, now he's a winemaker, which is a little bit different. He does use some of the things that he learned in university, especially when there's any kind of electrical problem. He can fix the tractor all by himself.
We have some feedback. I think someone needs to mute themselves. I'm not sure who it is. I'm just gonna voluntarily mute some of you, if you don't mind. So thank you. Okay.
So Alberto just brought out new glasses, which is a great sign. So I think that means that we're moving on to the next wine. The next wine that we're going to taste.
So Alex, sorry, just we do have a couple of questions. I just want to make sure we're getting to them. So I'll just start from the beginning. Maybe we'll just take a pause. So Eleanor was asking if the winery is biodynamic, and I answered her saying that it certainly has that biodiversity that you were referring to earlier. but they're not certified organic because they're not certified biodynamic because there is a various, biodynamic certifications. And then I replied to her also saying that he's also organic, but he doesn't have a certification for that either. We had Elaine asking the altitude of the winery, which maybe you can respond to that.
L'altitudine, l'altezza qua, che cos'è?
Qui è dai 350 metri ai 430, sì, ecco.
Okay, between 350 meters and 430 meters.
Non è un'altezza bassissima, ecco. Qui, per esempio, quest'anno è venuta una gelata primavera, molte vigne che sono più basse hanno sofferto questa gelata, quindi nel momento in cui la vite crea nuovi germogli, il freddo le ha bruciati. Qui invece questo problema non c'è stato, quindi la quantità di uva è
altitudine,
sì,
è
sì,
più alto.
sì, è più alto, e quindi qui le brinate, cioè le gelate mattutine vengono sotto 200 metri, 250.
So this is really interesting what Alberto was saying. He was saying that this last spring, there was a really big freeze that hit Montalcino. It got down to, if I remember correctly, about minus 7 degrees Celsius. And a lot of vineyards were really negatively affected. Alberto was really lucky because of the altitude. It's kind of counterintuitive, but the frosts really tend to hit the wineries that are below 200 meters. So since he's above 200 meters, he wasn't affected by that and he didn't lose any of his grapes, whereas other wineries unfortunately lost quite a few grapes.
Infatti molti produttori che stanno qui sotto a me per salvare la vegetazione fresca, che è la nuova buttata, hanno acceso le presse di paglia, le tonde, sai?
Sì.
Ma anche 7-8 per notte le accendono e fa caldo, capito? Quindi quel discorso della sorgente a me ha aiutato un po', poi sono più alto, quindi questo problema di congelamento dei germogli è minore.
So Alberto didn't have any problems with the frost, but he was saying that the wineries down below him did, and they had to actually go out during the really early morning hours when it was coldest and start fires in the vineyards to warm up the environment and not lose any of the grapes.
E infatti anticamente nell'Ottocento, anche nei primi decenni del Novecento, le vigne erano tutte a media collina, cioè da 300 metri in su, e più basse c'era campi di grano.
Okay, so he was saying historically in the past, at the end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s, all of the vineyards were located above 300 meters because of this problem with the frost. Below 300 meters were all of the fields of grain.
E ora continua a esserci questo problema, cioè, il pericolo è quello. Magari sono più avvantaggiati durante, ti posso dire, una precoce raccolta, cioè, però questo problema iniziale, io l'uva non l'ho persa, loro hanno perso un po' di quantità, quindi il territorio è più, riesce a conservare meglio tutti i germogli e quindi tutti i grappoli.
Okay. So Alberto was saying that his location is really privileged because it tends to be protected from these kind of frosts that were present both in the past and then still today. So Sheila, were there some other questions?
Yeah, so there were a couple of questions about the oak barrels that he's using, and one question was is what do we mean by neutral oak? It's mainly it's used. He uses used oak barrels, but then there was a more specific question about if it was French oak, and then how large the barrels are.
Okay.
Sì, ho capito. Praticamente il disciplinare per fare l'affinamento del Brunello implica una scelta di affinare le masse atte a divenire Brunello di Montalcino nel rovere. Poi è scelta del produttore della cantina se adoperare tonneau, barrique, botti e quindi anche il tipo di rovere francese o rovere di Slavonia. Anticamente esisteva solo, diciamo anticamente nel senso 50-60 anni fa, la botte di rovere di Slavonia. Poi il commercio, insomma, l'idea di novità ha anche immesso nel mercato botti di rovere francesi, lavorate anche in maniera diversa, ecco, lavorate a fuoco, lavorate a vapore, quindi è un discorso molto personale della cantina, poi scegliere quale tipo di botte, quale tipo di rovere, botte e modo di lavorazione del rovere andare ad acquistare per affinare il Brunello o anche il Rosso come faccio io. Quindi,
e tu usi le botte di Francia?
Io adopero solo botti di rovere francese che hanno una lavorazione a fuoco, simile a una barricca. Ecco, quindi questo perché? Perché comunque con una lavorazione a fuoco la porosità del legno rimane più aperta e quindi c'è molto più passaggio di ossigeno verso l'esterno e quindi di ossigenazione del vino.
Okay. E quanto grandi sono le botte?
Le botti sono da 20 a 24 ettari.
20-24?
2000-2400 litri.
Okay. So the big barrels that you use, in Italian, they're called botte. Those really, really big barrels that you all saw downstairs. And he uses botte, the big barrels from France. And they're between 2,000 and 2,400 liters. Sheila, were there some more questions that came in, or can we try to explain?
Yeah, there was a question about the harvest and the sorting of the grapes, if this is done by hand or with the machine.
Allora, lavori a mano o con una macchina quando fai la raccolta?
No. Allora, i pendii implicano solo un lavoro a mano, cioè non è da scegliere, cioè io ho la possibilità di scegliere. No, non c'è disciplinare, cioè uno può raccogliere anche a macchina. Okay. Però qui noi si è sempre raccolto a mano. È bello raccogliere a mano perché comunque vedi il grappolo e se c'è da togliere qualcosa non hai bisogno di banchi di scelta. Per di più qui è impossibile lavorare con macchine a mano, cioè la raccolta è solo con macchine. Sì, no, è impossibile perché queste macchine sono talmente grandi e qui il posto è molto costretto, sì. I vigneti sono molto vicini ai siepi, poi ci sono i muri, le pendenze, è pericoloso e non è e basta, è pericoloso e basta fare una cosa del genere.
E tu fai la scelta delle uve in campo?
Noi quando si raccoglie i grappoli, le persone che tagliano i grappoli, se c'è dell'uva secca viene tolta in quel momento.
Okay. E in quel momento decidi quale uva va per
in quel momento, in quel momento, siccome sono 11 pezzi, vedo la maturazione di tutti gli 11 pezzi, 10-11 pezzi, e in quel momento faccio la massa delle uve che è predisposta al Rosso, predisposta a Brunello o a Rosso di Montalcino. Sì, decisione fatta prima, 2 o 3 giorni prima della vendemmia, perché non è che la faccio nel momento in cui la raccolgo. Analizzo ogni pezzo da me con la chimica o anche senza chimica, si può fare in tanti modi. E poi una volta che vedo che quel pezzo è più maturo e quell'altro no, quando vado a raccogliere unisco i pezzi più maturi o a seconda di quelli che hanno più colore.
Okay. So historically here on this property, they've always harvested completely by hand. So that was something that his great-grandparents were doing in the past when they were growing that small quantity of grapes, and it's something that his father and he have continued to do. So 100% by hand. He also said that it would just be impossible to use machines on this property because remember, it's completely unlevel, and then it's also just quite small. So, and there's all those other plants, there's walls, so it would be impossible to maneuver with any kind of machines. And then I was asking Alberto about the selection of the grapes and when they do that. So he said that it's done a few days before the harvest. He'll go out into the 11 different plots where they have the grapes growing, and he'll look at the grapes and decide which grapes are going to become the Rosso di Toscana, the Rosso di Montalcino, and the Brunello.
So it's basically all by hand, including like after they take the grapes from the vine and they're going into their cantina to make the wine. Even the selection there of the grapes is done by hand, right?
Exactly. Yeah, he was saying when they harvest the grapes, if there's any kind of defects or if there's any grapes that seem a little bit dry, anything like that, that he doesn't want to go into the wine, at that point they will remove it by hand. So it's a very manual process. Everything is done by hand. Yeah.
Okay. So let's start the next wine.
Excellent. Versare per noi. So this is the Rosso di Montalcino. Quale anno abbiamo?
2017.
So 2017. So this wine, like the last, is 100% Sangiovese. But something that really surprised me about Alberto's Rosso di Montalcino is that he made a personal decision to age the Rosso di Montalcino for a long time in wood. So even longer than most of the wineries do here in Montalcino. So Alberto, can you tell us a little bit just about your philosophy with making this wine and why you decided to age it for so long in wood?
Allora, il Rosso di Montalcino, noi abbiamo cercato comunque di fare un Rosso di Montalcino simile al Brunello, con un po' di invecchiamento in botte come il Brunello, non la stessa quantità di anni, però si avvicina, ecco, ad un affinamento molto importante, perché comunque è un Sangiovese come il Brunello che viene dalle stesse viti, quindi alla fine ha un tono minore di colore, ha una gioventù maggiore ed ha un trattamento similare al grandissimo Brunello di Montalcino, ecco, che da molti anni i miei soci riescono nelle loro cantine a produrre, e quindi è conosciuto in tutto il mondo, ecco. Quindi è trattato nella stessa modalità, ecco, ci vuole un po' di tempo, ecco, non è che il Sangiovese in fretta e furia non si riesce a produrlo con una buona quantità, ci vuole gli anni anche qui, non è che in un anno o due si risolve il problema, ha bisogno di affinamento in legno, ha bisogno anche di affinamento in vetro e fortuna per chi lo compra, perché ha una lunga durata anche questo. Ecco, più uno riesce a tenerlo in cantina e non berlo, e più è buono.
Okay. So Alberto was saying that basically his philosophy with making the Rosso di Montalcino is that he wanted to make it in a very similar way to the Brunello. So he wanted to age it in wood for a long time. He said that with the Sangiovese grape, it's a bit tricky. You can't work in a fast and furious way. You really have to give it time to age and to develop. And so it ages both in wood, and then it also ages in the bottle before it's released on the market. And what that means is that this Rosso di Montalcino has a huge capacity also for aging at your home. So once you buy it, of course, buy some to drink now, because it's great to drink right now. But it also has a great capacity for aging. Per quanti anni puoi invecchiare questo secondo te?
Allora, io di solito, quando questo vino è stato imbottigliato l'anno scorso, è sempre giovane, quindi io ho anche rossi di Montalcino che risalgono al 2004 e sono sempre buoni, quindi si parla di la bellezza di 17 anni di vino rosso di Montalcino invecchiato in bottiglia. Poi alla fine ha una durata, trattato come viene trattato nelle nostre cantine, il vino quando è in bottiglia ha una durata similare a quella del Brunello, quindi si parla anche di molti anni, non c'è problemi di invecchiamento. L'unico problema rimane il tappo, il cork, quindi è sempre rispetto della distesa, se c'è una perdita consumarla, ecco, consumare la bottiglia.
Okay, that's a good tip.
Sì, il limite è il tappo, quando una acquista il tappo sempre.
Okay. So I was asking Alberto, how long can you age this Rosso di Montalcino for? And he was saying that he has bottles of Rosso di Montalcino from 2004, that first year that they put their wine on the market, and it's still fantastic. So it really has a lot of possibility to age. He gave a couple of tips. So he said that really the only thing that holds it back with the aging is the cork. So you always want to, you probably all know this, but I'll just share it with you. You always want to age the bottles horizontally, laying flat. And then he said, if the cork were to start leaking, open it up and drink it at that point. So Alberto, can you tell us a little bit about what we're smelling in this wine? I profumi in questo vino.
Oh, sorry, Alex, just so I don't forget, there's a question about the Rosso di Moltaccino. How long is it aged in oak? And just to clarify, it is the botti, so the large barrels of French oak.
Yeah, it's always, he doesn't, non fai niente, but
No.
So he doesn't work with any of the small wood barrels. They're always the really big wood barrels, like you guys saw in the first part of this video. E per quanti mesi, quanti anni questo è?
Minimo un anno.
Per la disciplina.
No, non c'è disciplinare. No, per il Rosso di Montalcino non c'è disciplinare. Uno può mettere nel mercato anche l'anno successivo, basta un anno. Però il disciplinare non dice cosa è necessario per obbligo di legge fare. Il Brunello sì, si tratta di 24 mesi minimo. Il Rosso è sempre una scelta del cantiniere e dell'azienda.
Almeno un anno, ma di solito di più, no?
Sì, di solito di più. Okay. Però non specifico mai, perché di anno in anno può cambiare, ecco, quindi si supera abbondantemente l'anno. Ecco,
so now we're getting into the secrets of the winemaker. So Alberto was saying that because there's a discipline for the Rosso di Montoccino and the Brunello Di Montoccino, there's a consortium, a group that controls how these two wines are made. So the control group doesn't say anything about this wine being aged in wood. It doesn't have to be aged in wood. That's a personal decision that Alberto made. And so his personal philosophy with making the Rosso di Montalcino is to age it for at least 1 year in wood. However, he often does it for even more than a year, but he never specifies exactly how long he ages it, because it depends from year to year. So it really depends on the harvest and how the grape was, how long that year's wine, that year's Rosso di Montalcino is going to be aged in the barrel. I hope that clears that up.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So let's get back to the tasting.
Sheila,
Absolutely.
Sheila, may I make a comment?
Sure.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but this is something I think very important for a consumer, because there's a tendency to think that DOC wines, that is wines that are done with the disciplinary, all the rules and the regulations, indicate the highest quality wine, but that isn't the case. DOC means that they made the wine, they grew the grapes, and they did the harvest and everything else, following the rules and the regulations that are set out for that particular type of wine. And often, if you find a table wine, that's which like the baby of the grower, because he's gone off the regulations. He can't call it DOC. It's usually IGT, but that's sometimes the best quality wine of the winery. And this is sometimes a little confusing for a consumer because the Italians made it a little bit complicated. The DOC means that it's done according to regulations. IGT does not mean that it's a less quality. It could mean that it's actually the best wine that the winery has. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think that's an important point for the consumers to know.
Dice, la DOC ha una qualità maggiore perché rispetto all'IGT il vino viene analizzato prima di dare la DOC con le analisi chimiche e anche olfattive, cioè viene fatto un test di questo vino, vedono se ha qualità, gradi maggiori di acidità, maggiore di, e quindi solfiti maggiori di, e quindi se ha tutto in ordine, poi a livello, quella è l'analisi chimica, quindi come quando fai l'analisi del sangue, poi prendono le bottiglie, quindi le prendono le bottiglie, una la mandano ad analizzare, poi prendono un'altra bottiglia e c'è una commissione di persone, enologi e anche sommelier, che assaggia il vino. Così accade anche per il Brunello, però ci sono limiti più restrittivi, ok? Questo è quello. Per i GT non ci sono i controlli organolettici dal punto di vista chimico, quindi analisi, e anche olfattivo e di gusto. Quindi ti possono bloccare il vino perché non ha qualità. Cioè non è atto a diventare una DOC, non è atto a diventare una DOCG, soprattutto se non hai magari l'invecchiamento e l'affinamento registrato e i controlli che fanno, quindi deve essere sempre tutto in ordine.
So what Alberto was adding, just to your comment, was that with the DOC and the DOCG wines, they are controlled. So all of them are, of course, the winemaker has to follow a set of rules when they're making the wine, but then the control group, the Consortium, actually takes the wine and does chemical tests on it, and then also puts it through olfactory tests as well. So there is a certain level of control and guarantee to it, but I also do hear your point that sometimes winemakers decide not to go through all of that, and the other products that they're making that aren't DOC or DOCG are also very worthy products. So an interesting discussion, and definitely one that we could talk about probably for a long time over a really good glass of wine. So, thank you.
Susana, contenta?
Sì.
Una signora quella.
Sì, sì.
So let's just doing a time check. It's almost on the top of the hour, so
Okay.
I'm sure we're dying. I know I'm dying to get to the Brunello, but let's finish the tasting of the Rosso di
Quindi
Montalcino.
si sente molto il frutto proprio fresco del vitigno, le uve, si sente molto le uve, fragole, more.
So you smell a lot blackberries and strawberries.
E l'affinamento, il rovere, che non è molto addictivo.
Just a note, so these are all 100% Sangiovese, and so the main fruit that you typically smell and taste is cherry. But I think because of the biodiversity that you were talking about before, potentially also the altitude, there are other types of fruits that you smell in his wines.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does anyone have the wines with them that they're tasting? I mean, feel free to to unmute yourself, tell us what you think. Are you pairing it with the charcuterie there?
Alberto's dove into our tagliere here. So he's snacking on prosciutto.
And I heard about the pasta that he made.
Capopollo toscano, salsiccia dolce toscana.
So all of our
grana. Questo è grana.
Okay, all of our cured meats are from Tuscany. So we have Tuscan prosciutto, Tuscan capopollo, and then also a sweet Tuscan salami. And I have to tell you, it's really hard not to just dive in here. I'm going to spare you guys and try not to eat on camera too much, but yeah, it's a lovely spread that Alberto's put together for us. So I was going to say with the Rosso di Montalcino, before we move on to the Brunello, I love Alberto's Rosso di Montalcino. I think this is the wine that's really won me over here at Podere Canalino. It really is a baby Brunello. So you're getting a lot of bang for your buck with the Rosso di Montalcino. It drinks like a Brunello. It has this really great persistence to it. I can still, from the sip that I took almost a minute ago, it's still going and unfolding. So it's really, really just exceptional to drink. It would pair wonderfully with first courses. In fact, Sheila was hinting, Alberto also prepared us a pasta that we're going to eat in a little bit. And I think it'll go really, really well with this Rosso di Montalcino. So I encourage you guys all to get a bottle or a few. It's going to go quickly. It's really easy wine to drink, but also just really, really interesting. So let me have another sip of this, and then we're going to move on to the Brunello di Montalcino. Hai un altro bicchiere per me? Io devo finire questo.
No.
So the last wine we're going to be tasting is the Brunello di Montoccino. This is from 2016. So 2016 was an excellent year for Brunello. It's said to be one of the absolute best ever in the history of Brunello. 2015 was also very, very good. So those 2 years are kind of competing to be the best ever. So it's really exciting to be trying this vintage. Alberto, can you tell us a little bit about 2016? It was a really exceptional year.
È stata una bellissima annata, molto equilibrata, un po' meno calorosa dal punto di vista del sole del 2015 e quindi è un buon frutto, è un bel colore, molto equilibrato. Ecco, non ha un grado alcolico elevatissimo, ha una buona beva e una buona durata in bottiglia. Ecco, un'ottima annata davvero.
They said it was really, really excellent year. Wasn't quite as hot as 2015, but 2016 just produced a really, really well-balanced wine. It has a gorgeous color. Let me see if I can just put it up. Probably won't do it justice, but it's just incredible. And this wine has a huge potential to age. So questo qua direi anche 20 anni può stare in bottiglia anche di più, no?
Sì, ha una ottima durata, ha il tappo di una lunghezza maggiore e quindi questo è il tappo del Brunello che ha una altezza maggiore, potete vedere così, come si chiama? The height is higher.
It's longer.
In Brunello than the Rosso.
Exactly.
And this cork, natural cork, protegge, come si dice? Protects along a long time the Brunello, different of Rosso. This is the difference.
Okay, so Alberto is saying this wine really has amazing potential to age. It can go even over 20 years in the bottle. And what he was showing you guys is the corks. So this is the cork from the Rosso, and this is the cork from the Brunello. And I hope you can see that there on the camera. So this one is the Brunello, and it's longer than the cork for the Rosso. And that's done intentionally to enable the Brunello to be aged for a really long time. So
I had actually I got a question from a client which I thought was a good one. Like why is Brunello more age worthy, let's say, than the Rosso di Moltaccino or Rosso di Tuscano?
That's a great question. Perché il Brunello deve essere invecchiato più tempo invece del Rosso?
La qualità delle uve. Quindi se va a vedere ha un colore più intenso, quindi ha molte sostanze che permettono alla piccola quantità di liquido che è in questa bottiglia di essere preservato per lungo tempo nell'affinamento senza deteriorare.
So it really comes down to the quality of the grape. So if you remember, they do that selection in the fields and they choose really the absolute best grapes to go into the Brunello. And that's what enables it to be aged for a really long time. And so you can already see that in the glass. It has this just beautiful, really intense color to it. And that's why Brunello can be aged for such a long time. Were there any other questions coming in yet about the Brunello, or can we jump into talking about maybe some of the perfumes and scents that we're experiencing here?
I didn't see any more questions. I know we're at the top of the hour, so I figure we'll go a couple more minutes. I do encourage people that have the wine to, speak up. Feel free to show your video. Tell us what you think. Would be, it'd be great to get some of your, your input. Of course, I have mine. I have Stevie next to me who's tasting along as well. So, I mean, I think personally, it's really interesting to do this side by side of 3 different wines that are basically made the same way. They're all aged in the neutral French oak botti, like we were talking about, but it's all, it's all different. Let's say, slightly different changes. One is the selection of grapes, right? So the Brunello has the highest, the highest quality grapes. And then also how long it's aged, including aged, both aged in the barrel as well as aged in oak. But it's basically all from that hillside where you are, right?
The Brunello grapes are grown in a different area, giusto? Le uve per
Sì,
Brunello
sì,
sono
sì,
fatte vicino a Sant'Angelo
Sì,
di
sì,
Colle.
sì.
Too, no? Yeah, so the grapes for the Brunello are grown in a different area. So they're grown down the road about 5 miles or so from here. But then the rest of the grapes are all grown directly on the property where we are right now.
Okay. So it's the Brunello Vineyard, it's basically like a single vineyard, right?
Sì, è un cru più o meno, no? Per il Brunello, tutta la vigna là.
No,
è
sì,
fatto
sì,
solo per il
là si
Brunello.
fa solo dalla parte il Brunello. Qua c'è il rosso di Montalcino, buona e media qualità, e rosso di Toscana.
Yeah, you're correct, Sheila. So it's a single vineyard.
Okay. And is the altitude
La vigna è la
similar?
vigna che ha il diritto per legge di avere la possibilità di fare uva atta a divenire Brunello, uva atta a divenire rosso. Non è che puoi mettere l'uva di una vigna a fare il Brunello. Ecco. Questa è la prassi, questa è la legge. Cioè, il vitigno impiantato in questo terreno è atto a fare uva per produrre il vino di Brunello di Montalcino. Quindi qui si può produrre solo rosso di Montalcino. Ecco.
Okay. E le vigne Sant'Angelo in Colle
possono fare Brunello e anche rosso, ma
sì,
loro hanno la possibilità di fare Brunello.
Sì. E l'altezza di quella vigna?
Lì siamo a un'altezza un po' minore, no? Un po' minore. Sì.
Okay.
Sì. So sui 300 metri.
Okay, so the vineyard for Brunello is at 300 meters, so it's a little bit lower than 300? The area here.
300? Okay. And did you say, did I hear Alberto mention something about the choice? Well, maybe I can just, make the question. So why did he choose that specific vineyard for Brunello?
Don't use the right for that.
Okay.
La qualità delle uve è un cavello superiore a questa.
Okay. E poi il Consortium dice che quello...
E poi quello dice puoi farci il Brunello. La cosa più obbligatoria è che con quello puoi fare il Brunello, capito? Quindi sei costretto un attimino a prendere in carico questa situazione.
So he chose that vineyard to make the Brunello from because it's the highest quality. And then once he made that decision, then the control group, the consortium, says that those vineyards can only be used to make Brunello. Well, not only, I should correct myself. So they say that those can be used to make Brunello.
Okay.
If it's a year that's maybe not that good, then he could choose to use those grapes to make Rosso di Montoccino. But he can't do the opposite. So for example, the vineyards here on this property can only be used to make Rosso di Montalcino. He couldn't decide to spontaneously start making Brunello from the vineyards here because they've been classified as Rosso di Montalcino vineyards.
Yeah, that reminds me of when I went to, we have a producer who makes Barolo. His name is Aldo Clerigo. And when I went to visit him, he was explaining to me that that even in the same vineyard, there are parts of the vineyard that wouldn't be able to be used for Barolo, because of maybe the exposure, that it's getting, and so these DOCG authorities, are really trying to presumably ensure that the highest quality grapes is what's used for these wines, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Oh, we do have another question. Does the consortium limit the total amount of Brunello that can be made by the producers?
Il consorzio si limita la quantità che puoi produrre?
Sì.
Che cos'è?
Allora, per ottenere una qualità, obtain a better quality for Brunello, the law, the consortium of the producer give a limit of the quantity of Italy, come si dice?
Liters, possiamo dire.
No, 100 kilos for hectare. No, 100. For Brunello is 70 kilos for hectares. For Rosso di Montalcino, the quantity of kilograms for hectares is 80,000 kilograms. Okay. 8.000.
8.000. Ok.
80.000.
Ok. Per Rosso.
Per Rosso Montalcino.
Okay. Ma 70 per
e 70 per Brunello.
Okay. Per ettaro.
Per ettaro.
Okay. So the rules say that for Brunello, they can only produce 70,000 kilograms of grapes per hectare. For Rosso di Montalcino, it could be 80,000 kilograms per hectare. So it is limited, yes.
No, excuse me, volevo chiedere un totale di tutti i produttori tengono un massimale di produzione di Brunello in Italia?
No.
Ad esempio, se uno arriva nuovo, un nuovo produttore vuole fare un vigneto, dedicare quello a Brunello, ma loro dicono no perché abbiamo già la quota piena.
Allora, in Italia tu puoi produrre solo a Montalcino, nel comune, nel territorio, nel circondario di Montalcino, Brunello di Montalcino. Ed è proprio un discorso di commercio. Cioè, se c'è la possibilità di fare di più, si fa, se no, e sono i soci di questa zona di Montalcino, che è molto piccola, non è estesa, non è una regione grandissima, è molto piccola, che dà la possibilità a chi produce Sangiovese in questo territorio di fare Rosso di Montalcino o Brunello di Montalcino. E è limitata, cioè i vigneti sono quelli, ormai più di quei vigneti non si può fare, il momento è chiuso, cioè non è che uno può aumentare, non è che io vengo qui, vieni qui a comprare dei terreni dove c'è il vitigno a Brunello, il vitigno a Rosso, ma non è che tu vieni a Montalcino e fai quello che vuoi, capito? C'è sempre la provincia, la regione, lo Stato e comunque anche il comune e tutti i soci che decidono di limitare, e hanno da anni che è limitata la situazione degli ettari posti a Brunello o posti a Rosso di Montalcino. Comprende? Poi se vuoi tradurre anche quegli altri.
E allora, è perché il Brunello e anche Rosso di Montalcino possono essere prodotti solo nel comune.
Solo, only in this commune.
So it's limited because both the Rosso di Montalcino and the Brunello di Montalcino can only be made within the municipality of Montalcino. So it's limited by the amount of space. As soon as you go outside of the municipality of Montalcino, if you have a winery right outside of the municipality, you can make wine out there, but you can't call it Rosso di Montalcino or Brunello di Montalcino. Does that answer the question? Excellent.
And how many bottles does Alberto make every year? What's his annual production?
10,000. 10,000 bottles, the number, the
Average.
average.
Yeah, so that's
for a year.
small. He's a small winery. I know earlier when we had questions about whether or not he's certified biodynamic, my experience is that for producers that are small, like Alberto, it's too costly and time consuming for them to get the certifications. And in fact, a lot of the producers that we embrace don't have those certifications because
Sheila, can you hear us? Because you're frozen.
I'm frozen. Oh, that's weird. You hear me now? Okay. She's frozen. I guess
They're frozen.
I guess they're frozen. Okay.
Too much wine.
Yeah, well, they're in the countryside, so although I'm in Ventura, California, and certainly we have our electrical problems every so often here as well. Well,
No, it's a common problem in Italy. I always have that problem.
yeah.
Unfortunately, so interesting.
Yeah, well, I guess that's probably the signal that we should probably just take time just to enjoy the wines. It looks like your reception there wants to have you enjoy the wines and eat that wonderful pasta dish that Alberto prepared for you. So
Yes, I can't wait to dive in.
Stop it. What kind of pasta is it?
Lei è gelosa perché hai fatto la pasta per me. È vero.
Come
Yes, come.
to me. Vieni a me.
Yes.
I prepare what you want. Ok, bistecca tagliata, risotto ai funghi, quello che vuoi. Pizza.
Quanti giorni ho?
There is problem. We have 2 room with for you to hospitality
To stay.
To stay.
I hope to.
Be careful. Be careful. I'm not in Ventura. I'm closer than you think. I just may come.
Come visit us.
I'm in Ziano Piacentino.
Non so dov'è.
Piano.
Ah, ok.
Zeta.
Ok.
Ziano, in Emilia.
In Emilia.
Ah, che bello. Ho vissuto a Bologna per tanti anni. Allora, devi venire qua a visitarci.
In fact.
Okay, well, this was wonderful. Thank you, Alberto, for inviting me to your house and inviting all of us in and letting us try your wines and talk to you a bit.
Thank you.
And learn about the winery. I really, truly encourage everyone to get their hands on these bottles through Sheila's wonderful site, Vero Vino Gusto, and try them. And like Sheila said, it really is worth it to buy all 3 bottles. She has a really nice package put together. And to do a tasting like this, invite over some friends, make a tagliere like this, make some pasta and try them, because it's so interesting that 3 wines made from exactly the same grapes can be so vastly different. So give it a try.
Grazie tanto.
And Alex, I put in the chat your Instagram handle, Italy with Alex. And so for people that are interested in traveling to Italy, I know you have some great experience putting together really interesting, one-of-a-kind trips for Americans and people also from other countries. What's your website?
So my website is alexsmoklertravel.com. And yeah, if anybody's looking to come to Italy, I would love to help you plan your trip. What I really specialize in is connecting people to experiences exactly like what we're having right now. So meeting local people like Alberto. So I'd love to help you have that kind of trip here in Italy. So contact me if you're looking to come over.
Good. All right.
Thanks so
Well,
much.
thanks everyone for joining us and for your active participation. Thank you, Alex and Alberto. Buona domenica.
Buona domenica.
Buona
Ciao.
domenica.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you,
bye.
Sheila, for
Grazie.
Ciao Sheila.
Ciao, ciao. Grazie.
Ok.
Ciao, Laura. Laura.
Io stavo a